Hey, 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 hey. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. It's oh my gosh, it's time for another edition of the Feedback Loop. It's a lovely morning here. Glad to have you along. If you're watching this on the live stream, you've probably already got the notification inside of Discord. If you're watching this afterward, be sure to sign up for the Discord. Be sure to sign up for access to the Discord channel over here on Discord. You can go to newpragmatic.com and just click the link that says sign up for access. That'll get you right into the community. Discord's great because if you have questions about the work that we're covering, it's a great place to ask those questions. And obviously, if you're signed up for mentorship, you get your work reviewed by me every morning. So let's go ahead and jump on in. We've got a few things to get to. I know Rebecca's bringing her presentation here in a moment. We got Katie's in here. I want to circle back on Luigi as well. Luigi had a lot of stuff yesterday, and while we had a session, I wanted to dig in on a couple of observations that we had from yesterday's session that I think would be beneficial for everybody here on the live stream. So let's start over here with Katie's personas. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn off my let's see here. Yeah, I did hide my Figma controls. You can do that, by the way, by hitting command / and that will allow you to turn the controls off. But I literally did it without thinking about it, and then it was like, well, where did it go? Is it already gone? It is already gone. So these are Katie's personas, and if you have gone through the curriculum at all, you know that I teach personas a little differently in that I really look at a persona as a guiding force for your team, not as an individual. This is more of a composite that comes out of your research. And there are many things that we're utilizing the persona for. We want to have a idea of what the general thrust is coming out of our affinity mapping. And to get back to that, I'm going to go back over here to my my project. I've got her affinity mapping right here. Oh my gosh, Fonzo's running in here. So we're looking at the priority canvas for Katie, and she identified that service value and health were like the two big priorities for her users, and then she had some secondary options as well. But when we look at the personas, and I get down here to goals, I should see goals and the frustrations, and then the scenarios. They should be representative of what the key thrust that came out of affinity mapping was. You can't throw an affinity map up on the wall and have it resonate with people quite like this person, and the actual, the words that are coming out here are typically from your user interviews. These are actual things that were said in user interviews, and we've keyed on those because they match up with the priorities that we've identified in the affinity mapping exercise. So balance having a healthy lifestyle between my job and family. So a couple of things here. The intention here for our personas is that we're going to hang them up. We're going to have them available for our teammates to look at. So you want to go through and make sure all the typos are eradicated out of these things, because that's just the little thing that'll get the giggle going, and it makes you take it a little less seriously. So between vegetables. I don't know if you've ever seen Smudge the cat, but Smudge the cat dislikes vegetables. or does not like vegetables, as my wife will tell me often. She loves Smudge the cat. So watch out for the typos. And again, much of this ends up being linked to in your portfolio of work. So you also want to like eradicate that stuff there. So Katie, clean up the typos. But in terms of like, what am I looking to see in it? I'm looking for health. I'm looking for value, and the goals: balance, having a healthy lifestyle between job and family, cut down on the amount of times I have to eat out a week to save money. That's value. Incorporate more vegetables and variety into my diet. That's health. Like the goals are lining right up. Finding time to make myself finding time to make lunch for myself while getting the kids ready for school, ready in the morning. That is value. Okay, this is going to allow me to do the thing that I can't do. I can't make more time. But if I can spend money with you and get from you the thing that I need that allows me to avoid this frustration, value. All right? I'm so tired of eating boring takeout salads. Okay, so that they're looking for variety, and that doesn't quite value, but it is health. They're talking about specifically salads, and this is going to align your team with, okay, what is this customer trying to do? I usually have to eat quickly between meetings. Back the time, okay? Time is a frustration. Scenarios. This is a person that like gets up at 5 a.m., gets a quick run in, so they have to plan out ahead. So this is somebody who's going to go to the site and plan out their meals on Sunday, and then they're set for the week, so they don't have to think about it, so they can get on to other things. This, again, goes back to value. I love my job, but it does keep me busy the whole day. I'm lucky if I get 20 minutes, another misspelling, to eat uninterrupted. Yeah, that's a misspelling as well. So there's like 5 or 6 misspellings in here, just in these 3 columns. So let's fix that, Katie. But as far as the gist of what you're trying to get through out of your persona, Jamie's on point. And of course, having the idea, she's 42, she's director. This stuff is all it's all coloring in the blanks. I'm sure somebody in her persona, somebody in her user interview group or in the surveys fit this description, but all of this down here is much more of a composite. Looking over here at Peter here. Peter, learn how to eat healthy but still enjoy my meals. So Peter's looking to have a little bit of education thrown in here. He wants to eat healthy, again, going back to the top priority, but isn't really quite sure how. And this is going to guide kind of, okay, so how are we going to present the information back in the service so that we have a service layer on the site doing work. What are we showing so that people like Peter get a better sense of what they're actually ordering? I want to cut down on eating out and not use traveling as an excuse. Co-signed. Set a monthly budget for how much I spend on food and stick to it. And this is something that you can actually, if a service can basically say, hey, we'll take your budget and we'll give you all the food so that you can meet that budget, that's value. All right. Now, whether you can hit that or not is a totally different thing. Frustrations. I travel to a different business every week, and I'm not always in the office for lunch. This goes back to that customization thing that was listed as secondary, but it underlies a very common thing that your clients are going to want to do. Learning how to eat healthy can be really exhausting in the beginning. I get bored eating the same thing over and over again. So that tells me that I'm going to need variety in the product offering. And then learning how to eat healthy can be exhausting. So I need to make this streamlined for people like Peter. I have never planned out meals before, and trying to make a healthy lunch before work takes too long. So I was looking for time and just make this easy for me. My office can be over an hour away from where I'm working on any given day. So I typically just grab something from a fast food joint. So it this this scenario points me to, I need to have the ability to like basically have these meals go to the person's house, maybe on the weekend. So they like are prepackaged. They stay in the fridge. He grabs one and he goes. Rather than I'm going to try to like deliver to wherever they are, because it sounds like this guy's just bouncing all over the place. So these scenarios are helpful because it paints out the struggles and the variability in how I'm going to reach this person. I didn't have that with Jamie. Jamie's more, I got to get my kids out the door and I'm very busy at my work and I'm in a singular spot. Peter is I'm all over the place and I really don't know how to do this. So, you have two users. They're both professionals, but they have very different scenarios. And a lot of that comes down to, position in life. Jamie's a middle-aged mom. Peter's a young professional. They're going to have different needs, and I love it when your personas are likely customers, but they're in different spots. You don't want two personas that basically mirror one another. So overall, Katie, I really feel like you did a good job. Get in there and pay close attention to the editing, because at the end of the day, this is something that ends up in your portfolio. This is something that when you're on the job, you end up getting this around to the team. You'll include this in an executive brief. Like, the typos can just be murder. So eradicate those and get off and running. So there's that. Let's take a look at this type specimen real fast, and you can see I'm working on form exercises as well. I will be dropping that hopefully later today. That form exercises came along really well yesterday. So when we hop in here and we look at the type specimen that Luigi put together, he picked out. There's a couple of things here to pay close attention to, and I'm gonna come down here to New Zeit Grotesque, and I'm gonna go ahead and just hide the grid for a second. I wanted to pay close attention to how we're utilizing the underlying structure, because we have cap height and ascender height and X height and baseline and descender height. We have all these grid lines provided, but we're not, unfortunately we're not using any of them. So I'm going to lock down our typography, and I want to come in here and begin adjusting. Let's go ahead and ungroup that. There we go. I'll ungroup this one as well. And now we can come in here and begin adjusting the lines here, so we can kind of see what we actually have. So this would be, what's interesting is this is a rarity where I see basically the cap height is actually larger than the ascender. Typically speaking, you have the ascender. It's kind of like down here, and we adjusted some of these last night. You see the ascender this is ITC Galliard. The ascender here is actually above the cap height. Down here, the ascender is actually lower than the cap height, which is, again, pretty odd. But it has a really tall X height. And I like paying attention to this, because the taller your X height, the more legible the typography is going to be at a smaller size. And it's one of the things that I want you to be aware of. This also has a bit of an overhang. You can see that because the bottom of the K is the baseline, but the S curves underneath that, so there's just a touch of an overhang. And then we have a really ample descender here, and I'm going to just move all of that down because this descender's got a long way to go. And there you have it. You have Newsite Grotesque, and it's you can see the difference right away. Like if we compare this to Makoko, and I'm going to hide that. If you compare these two, let's go ahead and turn that off. You can see that, man, the X height on Newsite is just honking by comparison to Makoko, which is more of a slab serif. And what we mean by slab is the serifs that are there are very blocky. They're not refined like these over here on Galliard are very, very. This is very much a traditional typeface that looks like it's been drawn with a pen, and you get a lot of stroke modulation here between the elements. The curve here on the serif, it is squared off, so that tells me that it's a little bit more of a modern serif. It's not just like a circular bulb like you would get from an ink pen, but anyway, the big thing here is as you go through and you look at pairing these together, well, Newsite and Galliard, they have a very similar structure. Like these are very tall. This is a very tall bit of typography by comparison with Makoko, and it's funny because I look at this structurally, and Makoko and Objective seem to be more one-to-one than what I see from Galliard and Newsite. And Galliard and Newsite, I'm mainly looking at the height of the actual letter forms themselves. The X height is also more in line with one another. So when it comes to pairing, I could see pairing those together a little bit more clearly than say going a different direction. But there was one thing that we discovered last night, and it was that in instances where I might want to use Newsite as like a traditional paragraph font or body copy, I don't have any italics with Newsite. And this, by the way, is a font that Luigi pulled over from Adobe. So normally when you pull over an Adobe font, you're thinking it's got a very robust family and it's probably got everything I need to do. But as you likely know, there are instances in at least in the English language where you will use italics to indicate the source of a magazine article or a book title or anything where you're identifying a work, you likely will go into italics, and there's no italics here. So that creates a problem over here in pairing when we pull this out and begin to use it for large passages of text. If there's no italics, I can't really count on it for something that's going to have a lot of text. Now, I mention that because there's, when you're just getting started with typography, you might not be thinking about, okay, how does this apply with all of the traditional rules of the language that I'm working in? But you need to be aware that if you have a limited set, even if you say, oh, my typography body style is going to be Newsite regular, well, that's great, but what happens when we need to have an italicized word in the middle of that? Oh, wait, there's no italics here, so I guess we'll have to fake it. That's bad. We don't want to fake it, especially when we have so many options that actually have italics. So keep an eye out for that. And that's not saying that you can't use Newsite, but maybe you have to use it just on like labels or headlines or something, and you can't actually use it for like large passages of text. Additionally, we were looking at typography and how it applies, and and stretching into utilization of space, utilization of letter spacing, of line height, utilization of things like underlines, like simple line work to help this step away. And I pushed Luigi into thinking about this in terms of what could we do to help this typography stand out that is beyond just simply making it larger. And because that's what we were getting into over here. This label here was like 14 and the body was 12, and same thing down here. The subscribe button was 18 or whatever, and our typography here is exactly the same, even though one's a headline and one's body. So what we did was we began looking at, okay, well, how can we utilize letter spacing? And letter spacing, if you're applying this to print design, this would be like kerning. So it's a space between the letters. And then how can we utilize line height? And here, I did utilize a bold, but I also utilized line height to give this a different feel. The intro here is doing a different job. And I realize this is just copied over and over and over again. But our goal is to kind of, we're trying to understand the structure. If this is intended to be an intro, I don't necessarily just have to make it bigger. I could make it bold, and then I could apply line height to allow this to step out and feel unique. Additionally, here if we compare this version to this one, so subscribe now, there's a lot of value in having a italic available to you. There's also a lot of value in saying, hey, you know what? I don't have to use just black, or I don't have to actually put a color in there. I could just use a gray. I could do something really bold and then mute it back with just a light gray. Additionally, I have these other jobs that I'm wanting the typography to do. Maybe I should just make the headline bold so that I don't have to make the smaller text bold, because the smaller text is actually very easy to read. But the headline was frankly pretty weak by comparison in this version, but when you move over, it really steps forward. And then there was this Taco John thing that we had at the bottom. And part of the problem here is we weren't applying constraints to it, and that's what we get into when we start talking about information design. And when you begin to apply constraints, what you begin to see is the need to think about, well, what would happen if this was Taco Johnson and grandson? Like, would it really be that big, or would you need to make it smaller? And can we stack anything to the side? Is there any variability to the typography and to the text? And we talked about the options for order, like pre-order, order, closed. Well, that's pretty much it. So if I wanted to do something like that over there, I could. And then there's these other options that are somewhat variable. I could still have a pretty long address in here. I could have a variety of hours and open and closed here. But those things could go side to side with order off to the right, where the name of the restaurant might not be as appropriate to do that with. So, we covered a lot of ground in a very short amount of time regarding the different things that you could do with the, again, all I provided him with was this basic typography, and our goal here was to see the different directions you could go based on the typography that we had selected over here. But the big hole in this was we'd selected a font, Newsite Grotesque, from a reputable source, Adobe, and it didn't have any italics. So you can't use it. As much as I liked where this was ending up at, and it's actually over here, you can't go along with it because you just don't have the support mechanisms in place for it. But you could use Objective MK1, another Adobe font. It has italics. So that means that over here, instead of saying, and I got to turn my tools back on. I could just come down here and say objective, switch it to that, and I really like objective more, mainly because it just has a nice weight to it by comparison. These these counters are much more open, or at least it appears to be much more open. I think it's also just the weight of it is nicer. So the regular is nice. So I don't know if I'd go extra bold. I'd probably kick this down to maybe just a medium, or medium's not quite enough. So bold. Yeah, bold's nice. But you get the idea. Provided that you have provided that you've paid attention to the, and boy, it's just a radically different look going down here with objective versus Newsite. So something to keep in mind there. And again, as we could have picked that up from right here. Paragraph thin was too small. Regular, pretty nice. Over here, kind of the same idea, but the presentation just isn't as strong as it is down here for objective. So that said, I'm going to jump along here. Rebecca's got a couple things. I've got to come over here. She's got her Okta presentation in here as well. All right. So, trying to figure out what I'm looking at. Let's hop in here and pick this out. All right, so this is Okta, right? And Okta, a case study. So there's a couple things that I'm going to encourage you to do, and I'm going to make a copy of this, and we're going to go down to the bottom. And so I just want to address this off the top. So these buttons, I want to look at your prototype. Are you literally using the buttons to? Okay, so so you're using the buttons, and that's fine. I would encourage you to just go to the edges with this. There's virtually no reason to not. So I would go to the edges with this. I would encourage you to maybe do something more like that so that you can see it. Over here, you've got problems, and you're in Open Sans Bold, and you've got resellers and all this. Okay, so you've done that. Let's go ahead and group these so that we can work with them. I'm going to align these over here. I really want to think about this in terms of I've got my spacing here. I need to, rather than do that, I want to apply a grid to this. So I'll go ahead and add a grid. Let's switch this to columns. Let's talk about margin. Margin off the side, 10's not going to be enough. Maybe 50. Maybe 80. And let's see what we've got here. Do I want to come to the inside of the arrow? Do I want to be the outside of the arrow? I'm not really sure. I'm just going to go to the inside of the arrow just for our consistency's sake. I'm going to turn it off for a second. Actually, I'm going to turn it back on. If we think about this in terms of, I'm not really sure why that's. Oh, it's because of that. All right. Well, let's do 130. All right, so there's that. I'm not sure you need the. Well, actually, you probably need to go in a little more that typography is pretty spacey. I don't think you need the colon here because it's basically like a giant label for the page. I do think that you need to think about, you know, how can I make, you know, I'll make another grid here. This one will be rows, and I'm going to set the margin here to be 70 as well. So this is basically making a perfect little square in the corner that you can, by the way, basically come in and turn on and off as needed. But in doing this, you give yourself an opportunity to align this work so that it is infinitely cleaner, and it's in the alignment that I think you're going to find the greatest amount of success. But I would say go bolder with the images, just go all the way to the edge. Focus on your alignment, and then, let's look at like the difference between these two. Okay? Alignment, larger image, no alignment. And part of the problem here with the no alignment is there's a lot of tension right here. I'm never quite sure, is this lined up with the top? I can't really tell if it's lined up because there's so much dead space here. Here, at least, it's going off the page. All right, and I'm not against just having that hand just kind of awkwardly cropped. It's fine. The focus is on her, not this hand. But the alignment is what I really want to get to the bottom of. Again, here you have something where it's like, okay, well, I can't necessarily just do the alignment the same way, but you can. And I'll show you in just a second. So there's going to be a couple things that I want to do first. I want to come back over here to this to the slide 2, and we have this grid, and I want to add that as a style. So let's go columns, and let's see what other. Oh, wait. No. Well, where did my... Oh, I must hit auto layout. Sorry. I didn't mean to hit auto layout. I did, in fact, want to see this. So I've got my rows and columns. I want to try to apply that here. I just want to say rows and columns, and I'll come in and yeah, okay. So by applying rows and columns, I now can see it applied to the next screen. Obviously, I've got a lot of work to do here, and I know you've got this. There's some really weird spacing going on here with regard to like this has got a very negative spacing size to it, but that's okay. I'm going to go more negative here. I'm going to bump that up because again, this is just a presentation, and we there's perfection that we can build into it, but right now I'm just trying to get it to a spot where you could show it to somebody. Let's go with this and that, and let's bring it in so that these things are aligned. And then we have the actual application. And I think your goal should be to get this inside. I'm going to basically bring it over, but I'm going to try to keep it away from this little arrow button down here at the bottom. I'm really focused on just trying to keep it aligned. And now I'm gonna hide this grid for a second, I'll do the same for this one as well. And let's, look at the difference between the two. Now, I'm not a big fan of colons here at the end because it's big, it's got color on it, it's already standing out on its own. But my big thing is, can you get these things to align? And if you can get these things to align, I think you're going to be in a great spot. Now you've got, this is competitive analysis, and competitive analysis, this is, for me, I think it's fine to have this centered. The bigger issue for me is like, this is like just kind of clearly going over the edge and it's not even. So this is where you could come in and apply, the grid to allow yourself to kind of organize that information. Trade show participants, I would knock participants down. But the real goal I have here is, can I just get these pages on some sort of grid so that this all begins to make sense? Can I adjust these sorts of things, like where it's clearly, this is 100, where this is 130. Well, do I have any other, like, what is the smallest size that I'm using? And, mood board. Why is mood board 78? I have no idea. Colors and typography. It's just bouncing around. I want consistency throughout. Okay. And I really do believe that if you could come through, let's just go ahead and take these two. Where did they go? Maybe okay, there they are. If you could just take these and begin to, we're gonna add that layout grid of columns. So let's turn it back on. So here we have drive, neat, cam card. All right. I'm just gonna put that here. Part of me is like, do I keep it centered? At minimum, I want it aligned with the top position. Part of me is also just like, well, maybe I align this left and bring it over so that it is consistent with the other designs. And then, here I'm a bit of a struggle, because part of me is like, well, do I even though this is not the same size, do I blow it up so that it's more representative of the size of like Google Drive, or do I leave it small? I'm not quite sure what to do with it, to be honest with you. I do want the spacing to be equal, but this is, I could go a lot of different directions on this one. Part of me is just like, okay, well, just line it up to where these are relatively, these are all like 2 columns tall. Neat is kind of centered. Let's get rid of this for a second. And now let's look at these side by side. And the one thing I do like is I have a common starting point. And having that common starting point makes this a lot easier to look at, to be completely honest with you. Here, the starting point's jumping from page to page to page. Here, at least it's clean. They said you're not going to be a JPEG producing designer, okay? You're not just pumping out JPEGs. But I do think that your ability to just organize your thoughts in a way that is accessible is key. Let's see here. So let's do the same thing here for user surveys. I'm going to go ahead and add I'm going to add columns, and let's pick those up. All right, user surveys. I'm going to bump that over just to get our alignment consistent. Now, it's still a little over. I also know that there are other areas where this is like 100, right? And that enters another question in terms of consistency. And I'm also going to measure this in. I didn't really get into, or I haven't gotten into the ways that I manage typography for large elements, but I definitely spend more time on letter spacing or kerning with large bits of typography than I do with small bits. If I knock all of this down, and really this is where, if I get this right and I just say, okay, this is 100%, and there's my box, and I'm just going to bring this up to the top. I don't want to have to do this over and over and over again, so I'm just going to create a style out of it. I'm just going to say, okay, well, you are clearly a style, and sorry, I'm not quite sure why it's not allowing me. Maybe I don't have it selected properly. Oh, weird. Mixed. Okay. Let's come over here real quick. Oh, well, that one will allow me. I'm not sure why, though, because that one's all busted. Well, this will allow me. Although I want this to be consistent. Let's turn on our grid. So I'm going to say header. Okay. And header is 100. Okay. And I realize that that's probably smaller than what you were wanting. But at the same time, there's header. And here's header. And here's header. Okay. And the whole point is that with a single click, you can begin to adjust these so that they are more appropriate and they're easier to apply. You can still go in and adjust spacing like this, which I'm a nerd, man. I have no problem telling all of you that I will come in and just kern the hell, and I say kern because I'm an old school print person, but I see spacing like this and I'm like, man, that 1.4, nope. But here, same thing here, 1.4, nope. And of course, what could I do there? I could just create a style out of it. That would be the better thing to do. But the long story short, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to come through and just get all of these things to line up. Right? And, we can go in here, trade show participants. Sorry, I want that to be down. I don't mind if it's centered. I just want these to be even. And if I come back in and I'm looking at the user surveys and I turn my grid back on, I probably sit here and I probably like move this up so they're all at the same starting point. And I'm probably also just moving them in from the edge, and then I'm adjusting the space in between as needed. So at least they're consistent. Now, I also could just move this to the edge here, same thing here, and try to take advantage of the space on the grid, and that would be fine too. Oddly enough, they're not going to move much because we've already distributed the spacing properly. And now, if we look at this from a perspective of a prototype, my belief is that this is going to work far better for you because it's consistent than what you had up above. And what you had up above was slightly chaotic because the information just moves around so much, and there's no like alignment. Okay, so I really believe that going through and getting a consistent approach to your typography will fix a lot of things. But one thing I do believe you need to do is I think you need to get away from this. I'm going to maximize my type size in each form. And then you get over here and you're suddenly shrinking things down and blowing them back up. I think that you've got to get it down. And then, again, in instances like this, I got to be honest with you. This is, and when I first looked at this, I said, well, this is something where I'm going to go up. But you've got like 5 things here. So I'm actually going to go down. I'm going to go down and I'm going to pay attention to the grid that I've created. And then I'm going to space these things out to where you can kind of see them. I'm going to undo that so you can kind of do what you need to do there. But ultimately, that's my 2 cents on how you should approach these elements. I would bring them in. Same thing, same discussion happens here. And I'm just going to copy this one because this one's a little different than the images that have the elements here. I would come in and I'd say, okay, well, I'm gonna apply that type style here. That's header. I'm also going to bring in the grid. Apply columns. I'm going to turn those on. So here I've got content and copy, and that's great. Content strategy and copy. You could also do content strategy and copy and then move copy over. But regardless of what you do, this image, I'm going up with it. I'm going to take this image. I'm going to go up, 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 up as much as I can. I'm going to probably crop her arm. I will come in. Additionally, I will crop off. Sorry. I'll crop off, and I gotta get my mouse out here. I'm doing this all with my mouse pad. I will do something like that. Okay. And then I will come through and say, okay, well, this is going to be content strategy and copy, and maybe I move the copy up. And, I might even begin to get in here on the header and saying, okay, well, I've got to come in here and like begin adjusting these multi-line elements. And then you've got to come in and consider, okay, well, do I need all of this space in between? And we're going for that 29. It didn't pop up there, but you get the idea. And again, I'm making this a copy for a reason so that you can come in here and say, Chris, you're crazy. I don't like any of that. Okay? Go in there and make that spacing right. But then you get into something like this, which by comparison, it is a radical departure from the haphazardness of this. Okay? So that's my 2 cents on it. I want greater consistency screen to screen to screen in this presentation than what you've got currently. And there's 2 big things. 1, grid. 2, typography. Okay? 3, push the images or constrain them. And when I say constrain, I'm talking specifically about over here where you've got like 5 things. You don't want those going off the page. All right? And I know we got a call later today, so I'm going to leave that with you off and running. Go hit Okta. I know you've got an interview tomorrow, but this is very important. It is very important to get your presentation together. Nobody wants to sit through you scrolling through your case study. Your case study is your script. Your case study is what you want to talk about. But I'm glad that you have these elements together. All right. And then Fonzo is running in here now. Fonzo, what is this? I haven't seen you submit anything in like eons, and so are you jumping into UX? Is that what you're telling me? Are you jumping into UX? Because if you're jumping into UX, we should have a conversation. We should have a conversation about mentor meetings and things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and look at this. But we should have a conversation about what Fonzo's doing. All right? So, fun time at the grocery store. I keep forgetting you're in Atlanta. 60 degrees sounds real nice when you're sitting here in Chicago right now in the middle of February. It's 2 p.m. Location was somewhat busy. There 15 to 20 folks were there. I like people watching, man. I love people watching. There's nothing. I won't say nothing, but there are a few things that I like more than people watching. You know, one of my favorite things to do when I go overseas, I like going to grocery stores. I think grocery stores are where you see how people live in that place. I actually have pictures online of I was chatting up some Indian guys who owned a little side. They don't have, the grocery stores are different there. You don't like roll in with your cart in India to a grocery store. But anyway, I digress. Customers between ages 20s and 40s. 10% of the crowd were over 50. 4 moms with kids. 8 couples. The rest were individuals. So a lot of people are like, I can't take the pressure. I'm going to the store by myself. Bet. Customers in the store were on the phone. About 50% exiting. Not so much except for 1 or 2 catching lifts. Okay, so when people were exiting on the phone, they were doing it. They were doing so with a specific interaction in mind, but they were still not really focused on like, oh, I'm in the grocery store, and you can't really catch those people with like advertisements and stuff. They are like zoned out. Number 1 last time went to the store. Afternoons are usually these are okay. Afternoons are pretty slow. Rate of humans factor of 3 during peak time. Bag rate also increases for getting groceries for the week as opposed to grabbing something for 1 or 2 nights. Lunchtime is also different at this location. Number increases, but the bag amount decreases. Folks just going to the deli and grabbing a sandwich for lunch. I think that observation ties in very well. Oh no, I can't look at the spreadsheet. So Fonzo, I'm gonna need access. I'll request access. All right, there you go. I requested access. I like looking at spreadsheets because it kind of gives me a detail into what your observations were and how you went about it. Luigi and Eve stand out as like amazing amazing wells of data that just kind of it just pops off the screen how much they jumped in. But Fonzo, let's have a conversation. Let's figure out what's going on, what you're doing, because this is the first I've seen you leak into UX. I thought you were doing the visual design thing. But anyway, I digress. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this version of the feedback loop. I got to jump off to a meeting. Tejal, you're coming up next. Rebecca, I'll see you this afternoon. And for the rest of you, have a great day. See ya.